Welcome to Retire with Purpose, a show specifically designed to help you maximize your financial confidence in retirement. Casey Weade is the CEO and Chief Visionary of Howard Bailey Financial, a certified financial planner and Wall Street Journal best-selling author. He's your host on Retire with Purpose.
Hey, I'm Casey Weade, and we believe in retirement strategies that are driven by meaning and purpose. Join us this week and every week as we discuss planning for your best retirement, pinpointing your purpose, building a rock-solid financial plan, and unpacking trending topics that could impact your financial future. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade. Joining me as he does every week, my good friend and co-host, Marshal Johnson here with me.
Hey, hey.
And this is the show for you if you are at retirement, in retirement, near retirement, or just seeking that coveted job optional status. You found yourself a home. We're going to be covering the retirement planning opportunity zone. So if you're between the ages of 50 and 72, you're in the opportunity zone.
In the zone, baby.
Oh, we're going to talk about those specific opportunities that you have to know around those 10 important ages that land in that opportunity zone. We're also going to talk about diffusing that IRA tax time bomb, and that's ever increasing tax time bomb, given that now you cannot stretch that IRA out over your beneficiary's lifetime. We're going to hit on that later. We're also going to talk about IRAs and irrevocable trust and different spending patterns in retirement. But I think what I'm most excited about is bringing to you world champion poker player Annie Duke.
Annie Duke.
I know for me, I watched her win the World Poker Series Championship back in 2004, so I was excited to bring her on the show so that she could talk about what it's like to read somebody's bluff, or how to just make better financial decisions in retirement or just as an investor. You're not going to want to miss that. But we are going to cover one of the articles sent out as one of the 4 articles we send out every Friday as part of our weekend reading for retirees and pre-retirees. Go on over to retirewithpurpose.com. First name and email will get you signed up to receive 4 articles with commentary from myself, distilling down the information that's trending right now. The latest investment strategies, tax strategies, retirement income strategies, the latest from the softer side of retirement as well. And this is one of those articles that we want to spotlight for you here. This one came to us from The Street. And The Street had this article titled 10 Must-Know Ages During the Retirement Planning Opportunity Zone.
Oh, I like the title, talking about opportunity zones, because I have a lot of conversations with families, Casey, where they come in and no matter what their age is, it's like, what should I be doing in my 40s or my 50s or my 60s? So there's some key milestones in that band of ages from age 50 on up to age 72, and there's a lot of things to think about, digest, and try to strategize around.
So where do you land? 50, 55, 59 and a half, 60, 62, 63, 65, 66, 67, 70, 72. Boy, there's a lot of big ages in there, and these are ages that we just have memorized. You know, these are ages that we work around every single day in our office because they are so important to retirement planning and the families that we're working with. And just because we haven't memorized, though, I think sometimes we go, oh, yeah, everybody knows that 65 is Medicare age. However, we often see 65 and 62 get mixed up, where 62 is the earliest you can file for Social Security, and 65 is when your Medicare eligibility begins. And I think those are probably 2 of the most common and well-known ages. But then you have 70 and 72. And you go, wait, 72, that's a new one. Well, that is because that age has changed. Due to the Secure Act, we saw the bumping of your required minimum distribution age from age 70 and a half bumped out to 72. So now that age is 72 and not 70 and a half.
Thankfully, we can get rid of that half, right? Who came up with that? 70 and a half, really? My half year?
I'll tell you who did. I believe that was the government.
Oh, that makes sense. Never mind.
Yeah, some things don't make sense. You just blame it on the government. So what about age 50 and 55? I think out of all of these ages, this is probably the least known of those ages. You probably know that 59 and a half number. You know, at 59 and a half, you can start withdrawing from your retirement accounts without a penalty. So your IRAs, you can start taking distributions out of those accounts after 59 and a half and avoid that 10% penalty. So if you have an IRA, you take money out of it when you're 50, now, even though you might be retired at 50 or 52 or 45, but if you take a distribution from that IRA, not only do you have to pay ordinary income tax on that distribution, but now you're going to be hit with a 10% penalty tax as well. So if you're in a 22% tax bracket, you're paying 32% on that distribution. That's pretty painful.
Yikes.
However, there are ages 50 and 55, and this is where I've seen planning mistakes go awry. This isn't just individuals making this mistake. I've seen many a financial advisor make the mistake of not understanding what 50 and 55 mean to a retiree.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that when you attain the age 55 and then you leave work, let's say you retire at 55 and a couple months old, you can access the funds in your employer plan. So your 401k, you can access those funds directly without that penalty that you just alluded to, that 10% penalty. The caveat, though, is you can't roll those funds into an IRA and then start taking distributions because now they're subject to that 59.5% 10% penalty. So it's got to stay in your current employer's retirement plan, not former employer's retirement plans.
Yeah. Years ago, there was a gentleman that we knew here from Indiana. He raised bison for a living, and that's what he did. He raised bison for a living, and when he came in to visit with us, he had wanted to get a second opinion. He was sick of paying these penalties, but that was the first thing that we noted before he said anything about paying penalties. We noted that he was under age 59 and a half, had everything in IRAs, and he was taking distributions every single year out of that IRA.
Right.
And I said, well, tell me the backstory, right? Well, he had retired, in his mid-50s, so 55 plus. He wasn't 59 and a half yet, and his advisor said, well, you're just going to have to roll all that 401k to an IRA, and you're just going to have to pay the 10% penalty. Well, that wouldn't have been the case, because if you separate from service after age 55, if he would have left some of those funds in his 401k, he could have taken distributions from his 401k because he separated from service after age 55 and avoided that 10% penalty tax. Now, there were things that we could do. We could do what's called a 72T. It wasn't perfect, but it did allow us to avoid some penalties moving forward, but we had to jump through some hoops in order to make that happen. It would have never been necessary had someone actually known the rules of age 55. Now, age 50, that's one that applies to public safety workers. So you got 457 plans. If you have a 457 plan, I think this is one that's even lesser known because there's just, you don't run into as many individuals that have 457s as have, say, 401ks.
Right. You got law enforcement officers, firefighters, border patrol, customs officers, those kind of folks.
Yeah, and if you're at that point, if you're 50, if you're 55, thinking about retiring, if you're approaching 59 and a half, you're trying to take an early distribution from those accounts and you want to know how to avoid any penalties, give us a call because this is our specialty. Call us at 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559, and we'll walk you through all of your options and all of these milestone ages you're going to approach throughout the coming years.
Yeah, so we move on. We got age 59 and a half. We touched on it. That's the age at which most people are eligible to withdraw from those traditional IRAs and 401ks without the 10% penalty. Then we move on to age 60. Now, age 60 is important to Social Security, especially for widowers who become eligible for Social Security survivor benefits at age 60. But you're still going to be limited by an earnings cap. If they're still working, it may not make sense to actually start those benefits at age 60. But for those who have no other choice, that is something available at age 60.
Yeah. And, I think that we get to age 63, and that's one that is relatively new to most taxpayers. This has to do with your Medicare premiums. So you don't think that Medicare starts till age 65, but you kind of have to think of it starting at age 63 because the premiums you pay at age 65 are going to be based upon the tax return you filed at age 63. Right. So 63 is kind of your pseudo Medicare age, right? And if you have an income that's going to penalize you when you turn on your Medicare at age 65 when you're 63, then it makes sense to file a form called Medicare Income Related Monthly Adjustment Amount Life-Changing Event. And that means you're stepping into retirement. So if you're stepping into retirement, your income is going to be substantially lower when you turn 65. You want to make sure you file this form so you can avoid any of those potential Medicare premium penalties, which could mean that you're paying twice as much as your neighbor does for the same exact coverage if you don't pay attention.
Yeah, you met Irma, right? Income-related monthly adjustment amount. Irma, we want to avoid her at all costs. Some people think that they just have to accept it for their first couple of years of being on Medicare, but that's not true. You can file that very lengthy form you referenced earlier.
Now, here are some ages I think are relatively trivial, and that would be 66 to 67. I think it's almost dangerous to recognize these ages. Some will say, well, I'm going to retire at 67 because that's my full retirement age. Who cares? Right? Because it doesn't change anything. If you wait one more year, you get an 8% bump in your Social Security benefits. Just because that's your full retirement age doesn't mean that's when you get the maximum benefits from Social Security, and that's where it's often misunderstood. Well, I'm going to file here because that's when I get my max benefits. That is not equivalent to your full retirement age. The full retirement age benefit that's listed on your Social Security statement is most useful because then we can use that number to calculate all the different scenarios of when you should file Social Security in conjunction with your spouse. That's where that number is really valuable, but that's really the only place that number is valuable.
Yeah, understanding that number, understanding what the statistic is, helps you build your Social Security plan, which I had a conversation with a gal this morning. It's her largest asset. It's going to be, because she plans on living to 100. You want to maximize that decision.
Well, if you want to maximize the benefit, you delay it till age 70. But just because you're delaying your benefit to age 70, it doesn't mean that that's how you're going to get the most net worth over your lifetime. That might be how you're going to get the most out of Social Security. However, you have to look at the big picture. What are you going to do with the benefit when you get it? Are you going to reinvest it? What's the taxability of that benefit? Have you lost out on opportunities because you filed and now you can no longer do Roth conversions? Your income's going to be too high. There's a lot to think about when you get to filing for your Social Security benefits. We run these scenarios in our office day in and day out. We can do so at absolutely no cost. We don't even have to have you come in and visit with our team. If you'd like to get a free Social Security analysis, all you have to do is send us over some basic information at info@howardbailey.com. We'll spit out a report that shows you when you should take your Social Security benefit, but that's just looking at Social Security in a vacuum. You're going to want to implement your Social Security decision with your overall financial strategy, and that's why we're offering a complimentary financial review for you today to meet with an independent financial advisor on our team, either in person or through a video meeting from the comfort of your home, and we'll help you determine how prepared you are to handle all those other retirement pitfalls that exist out there in the world: inflation, healthcare emergencies, rising taxes. In short, we're here to take the guesswork out of financial planning for you. It can take just 30 minutes. So for the next 10 callers that call right now, 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559, a comprehensive financial review with no obligation. Now for our question of the day. According to a recent study from the Financial Planning Association, within the first 10 years of retirement, what percentage of households have enough saved to cover their pre-retirement consumption? So on average, how many individuals have enough to satisfy their retirement income needs? 18%, 33%, 56%, 70%. We'll have the answer when we return.
You're listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade. Joining me, my good friend and co-host, Marshall Johnson, here with me to answer our question of the day. And that is this. According to a recent study from the Financial Planning Association, the FPA, within the first 10 years of retirement, what percentage of households have enough saved to cover their pre-retirement consumption? In layman's terms, how many people have enough saved for retirement?
Yeah, that's either 18%, 33, 56, or 70, all the way up to 70%. I wish that was true, Casey Weade. The answer is A, 18%.
18%.
That's
Here's the interesting point. So let's say this whole group retires. So only 18% of them had enough safe retirement as of their retirement date. Well, they did a longitudinal study. I think that's how that would be. Now, 10 years into the study, they found that over half of those individuals were now had enough saved for retirement 10 years into it. Why did that happen? Well, one of our past podcast guests, Dr. David Blanchett, who has done extensive studying in the area of retirement spending, thinks that these retirees are right-sizing their retirement. They're controlling their spending in order to make it last for the rest of their lives. That begs a question that, well, then could almost anybody retire regardless of how much money they have? The answer is yes. Virtually everyone could retire because it comes down to how much can you go without. What is the budget? Can you restrict your spending? Can you live off Social Security? Because many people can live off Social Security. Many of our clients live off Social Security, even though they don't. It's just force of habit. That's the way they've spent their whole life. Could they spend a lot more? Sure, but they just don't. They enjoy living off Social Security and they're set just that way. Then we have other clients that spend $25,000 a month, right? So there is a vast difference in how much someone actually needs to retire due to the vast difference in how we spend money.
Right, and it's a difference of financial planning too. Those individuals that have a financial plan that know they have a target and a spending goal, and they know they've got enough to confidently spend, then they don't have to right size anything. But somebody that's maybe on the border and doesn't have a plan, they adjust to Social Security and that fixed income. And so as he says, they right size their retirement. This is a great article. I would encourage anybody that was really trying to figure out, do I have enough for retirement, to read David Blanchett's work.
And we did a full-length podcast on that very article that came from our weekend reading for retirees. You can get a link to that article that really will shed light on why your planner's been doing it wrong if they expect your retirement expenses to increase every single year in retirement. So go there, check out that article, retirewithpurpose.com, where we also do a full-length discussion on that. We're taking an academic approach over here at Howard Bailey. We're talking to the PhDs. We're talking to the actuaries. We're talking to the individuals that have done the research, not the individuals that are out there trying to sell a certain product or a tool. That's real financial planning. You need your advisor to take an academic approach. And if you'd like someone to go down that road with you and really do spending projections, retirement projections based on the latest retirement research, give us a call at 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559. And now we're going to shift the mic back to you, see what's on your mind. So we receive questions throughout the week over at retirewithpurpose.com. There's a place for you to drop your question in the bottom right-hand corner of that screen that says Ask Casey a Question. That comes directly to me, and we will get you an answer to those questions. And if you'd like to be featured on the show, we'll feature your question here, and that's what we did for Roger. Roger says, I'm thinking I'll spend a lot of money during the first few years of retirement and then not so much after 5 years or so. From your experience, is this normally how it works? So a spending question right off the top.
Perfect. It leads right back from that article we were just talking about. So, I appreciate your question. I think that I like the fact that you're thinking about how you're going to spend. In my opinion, is it what I normally see? No. What I normally see is, we're creatures of habit, and we tend to have spending habits that don't necessarily fluctuate over time. But that being said, I think those first 5 years of retirement, and more importantly, maybe the first 10 years of retirement, there are things that you've built up anticipation for. There's things that you're trying to accomplish. You've got maybe some bucket list items that you're spending a little bit more for in those first 5 years or 10 years of retirement. This is a fine way to strategize. And what you really just want to focus on, Roger, is how much more, right? Try to quantify number one, why do you think you're going to spend more? Number two, how much more? And number three, account for that. Build it into your plan. And model assumptions can be difficult because, Casey, as we alluded to in that article, oftentimes we're using a flat inflation rate on spending, and that just doesn't naturally occur in the wild.
Well, I'd want to further understand your question, Roger, because it could be age dependent as well, depending on what you really mean by this question. Maybe you're retiring at 57 and you're going to start Social Security at 62. So those first 5 years, you're spending a lot more out of your investment portfolio. That would be pretty typical for a younger retiree that hasn't hit Social Security or Medicare age, or maybe you're waiting to turn on a pension. So maybe that's where the question's going. If it's going the way that Marshall took it there, I would probably disagree a little bit with what I've seen on average with over what Marshall's seeing. I think that's pretty typical that your average retiree is going to spend a little bit more, but in those first few years, but I wouldn't say 5 years. I think that time period is typically 1 or 2 years where there's some bucket list items we're checking the box on. Maybe we're doing the home remodel, we're getting that dream car, we're going on those dream family vacations, or getting the RV. I see a lot more excess spending in those first couple of years. And this goes along with one of our past podcast guests, Dr. Carl Pillimer, who is a professor of gerontology and human development at Cornell. He said that first 6 months to 18 months is where he sees the biggest spending on average, and he calls that the honeymoon stage. And then after that period of time, it's 6 months, 18 months, 2 years, there becomes this transition into normalization where we go, you know what, I would like to work a little bit. And now you're stepping into a second act at that point. And if you're going back to work, you're not necessarily spending as much. So yeah, I think that's pretty normal. But again, we would want to know a little bit more about your question.
Next up, great question there, Roger. Next up, we've got Suzanne. And Suzanne says, can you talk about utilizing an irrevocable trust as a beneficiary for an IRA or a 401k? What are the pros and cons?
Yeah, well, there used to be the ability to use what was known as a conduit trust or an IRA trust, where you could have an IRA, the beneficiary of the IRA pass into an irrevocable trust, essentially, that would restrict the amount of income your beneficiary could get from the IRA year after year. They might be forced to stretch that IRA out over their lifetime and follow RMD provisions. That is no longer an option. You can no longer follow that track due to the Secure Act. The Secure Act is now requiring that the IRA you leave behind is distributed to those non-spouse beneficiaries over a 10-year time frame. So you don't have the ability to stretch that out over the beneficiary's lifetime just because of your wishes or what kind of trust you put in place before you passed away. However, I will say if you stick around here in a little while, we're going to share with you a different type of irrevocable trust, a charitable remainder trust, and how that strategy could allow you to stretch out those distributions over a lifetime, much like maybe you're trying to accomplish with that traditional irrevocable trust. Thing is, we just have to do it a little differently today because tax law has evolved the last couple of years. If you still have a trust as a beneficiary of your IRA, you need to get that re-examined as soon as possible.
Yeah, and being aware that estate laws change frequently too. So things may change with coming administrations, and making sure that you've got a plan that everybody understands. I sat down with a family the other day, Casey, where the dad had established a trust, but we lost the trust. Once dad passed away, nobody could find the trust. So you need to make sure that your family's aware of your wishes, and people have copies of these things to make sure things happen the way that you wanted them to in the end. So thank you, Suzanne. Next up, we've got Scott. And Scott comes to us and he says, Casey, what are your thoughts on going completely virtual with a financial advisor? Can I get the same level of professionalism and service even if I don't meet with them in person?
I think that's a really neat thing that COVID did for us in 2020. Right. That was one of the positives that came out of 2020, that we've been growing our national audience for, some years, but 2020 really scooted that along very quickly, where I think people across the country said, oh, you mean I don't have to work with the best advisor in Columbia City, Indiana? I can work with the best advisor in the country? Yeah. Well, then I'm going to go find the best advisor in the entire country. And just because in best advisor, I think that term should be used loosely. I mean, best financial planner is one thing, but you also need to find someone that's the best fit for you from a psychological personality perspective, at the same time. So now you have the ability to shop around all over the country to find the very best advisor for you. Can you get the same level of professionalism and service? Absolutely. Sure. I would argue even more so. From a service perspective, do you really want to have to drive into your financial advisor's office? I mean, for for about a decade, we've been doing virtual meetings with clients that we've worked with all over the country. You know, they relocate and we hop on and we do virtual meetings. Some of those tools have shifted over time. You know, now we're not using Skype, we're using Zoom, right? And different tools like that. But that's more convenient for everyone, right? And you don't have to risk your life getting behind the wheel, which could be one of the most dangerous things you ever do in your life. And now the professionalism thing, yeah, it's possible, but I will warn you, here at Howard Bailey, it used to be that we wore three-piece suits every day.
Yeah.
Now that we're meeting so many individuals virtually in their home, I think we're a little bit more lax in the dress code.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point. And I used to think that it was more difficult to create that connection with individuals virtually. But as we found, like you said, over the last 10 years, we've got clients that have retired to different countries. We've got clients that are all over the country that we just physically cannot see in person any longer. And now it's really transitioned. And I think what can happen is sometimes you even have closer relationships with those individuals because you're spending good quality time one-on-one and there's no distractions. Like you said, Casey, you're not worried about driving in.
Everything's at your fingertips.
I mean, we got 11 inches of snow. It would have been very difficult for some people to get to our office. So that's a challenge.
Yeah, and if you're in that position where you want to find the best advisor in the country, give us a call right now. Meet with an independent financial advisor on our team, and you can do that either in person or through, as we said here, a video meeting, a Zoom meeting from the comfort of your home, or just a simple phone call might just get us started. We'll help you determine how prepared you are to handle things like inflation, healthcare emergencies, devaluation of the dollar, rising taxes. In short, we're here to take the guesswork out of financial planning for you. It can take just 30 minutes. So give us a call right now at 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559 for a comprehensive financial review at no obligation. Stick around because up next we have none other than the infamous Annie Duke.
You're listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade. Joining me, as he always does, I got Marshall Johnson here with me. I never get sick of inviting you back to the show, but I've done it now 200 times like 4, yeah. Like in the thousands probably at this point that I've said that line. So I try to keep a straight face every time I say it. Yeah. But we do have somebody different we get to invite to the show today, other than the one and only Marshall Johnson. We have the one and only Annie Duke. Annie Duke joined us for the Retire with Purpose podcast, episode number 216. And Annie is known for a lot of things. Annie is a best-selling author, a corporate speaker. She's a consultant in the decision-making space, and she's also a pretty well-known professional poker player. And that's where I remember seeing her win the 2004 World Series of Poker Tournament Championship. At one time, she was the leading female in the poker world. She's won more than $4 million in tournament poker.
Okay, Annie.
And she retired from the game in 2012, but continued to educate others on how to make better quality decisions in their lives. And that's what we focus a lot of our podcast discussion on, how to make more confident choices in life and in investing and in finance, how to detect when others are bluffing, and other decision-making strategies you could begin implementing right now. And we featured her latest book, How to Decide, Simple Tools for Making Better Decisions. We're going to be giving away copies of this book away to you right now in just a moment. So stick around to find out how to get a copy of your own. We have quite a few sitting around here in the office, so we want to get those to you. But first off, I wanted to ask Annie, how as an advisor, we can help clients avoid feelings of regret towards their investments and continue to focus on the long term. This is especially relevant as you step into retirement. You de-risk your portfolio, then the market takes off for the next 12 months, and now you feel a little regret, or you sold one of your major holdings in Bitcoin and it took off, and now you feel a little regret. Annie's going to share with us here how to get you in on the joke.
you have to get your clients in on the joke. You have to explain to them up front. Let's think about what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Let's look at historically what's going to happen. And I'm going to give you some examples, right, of both cases, right? Here's what would have happened if you kept your portfolio the way it is in 2008. Here's how frequently a 2008 type of event comes along. You know you're going to be sad then. But at the same time, here, if you have this portfolio, this is what would have happened in, say, a boom year, like 2016, right? Or when, Bitcoin is flying or whatever. And you're going to see that there's always going to be things that these two things are always going to be true. There are going to be things that you don't own that you wish you had. And there will always be things that you do own that you wish you hadn't. And that's because you're deciding under uncertainty and you're trying to figure out probabilistically what's the best balance for what my goals are. Those goals are going to change over your lifetime. So here's the secret for you. And this is where you have to really get them in on the secret. You're going to hear your friends complaining. You're going to hear other people talking this nonsense that if they'd only played that 7 deuce, then they would have had a full house at the end. But you know better. And that's the secret to why you're going to do really well. Because when you hear those people saying, oh, I was so smart, I put all my money into, right? You're going to be like, wow, that's really dumb. Maybe it's going to work out and then I'm going to hear about it from them, but I know that's not right.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin is perfect for this.
Sure.
You might think, maybe your neighbor said, I threw all my money in Bitcoin in 2020, quadrupled in value. Mm-hmm. And you're thinking, lost 75% of its value in 2018. So those gains could be gone in a matter of months.
Well, and I love the question too, because we deal with this all the time. I have people that are still hung up on their decision to sell Tesla at $80 a share, or they got hung up on, I did this or I did that. It's like too often we take these decisions and we take them to heart and we live with this PTSD, if you will, about prior decisions or the things that coulda, woulda, shoulda been. But I love how she says, list out both sides of the coin and determine what your comfort zone is and try to make those decisions from a place of knowing that you're not always going to be able to get those things right or wrong, or you're going to have to YOLO your life savings into game stock.
Just because you had a bad outcome doesn't mean you didn't make a great decision. Great decisions can still have bad outcomes. And in order to recognize this, it takes humility. And I'm going to let Annie explain that to you now.
Great decision, great outcome would be just rewards, right? You got what you deserved and you earned it. It was earned. Great decision, bad outcome would be bad luck. But you can also make a bad decision and get a bad outcome. That would be kind of like just desserts. But then you can also make a bad decision and get a good outcome. So that would be dumb luck, right? And we need to recognize that if we're not actually exploring to see where does it actually sit, we're going to take some pretty bad lessons from our past decisions as we're trying to figure out what the feedback is, which is the outcome of the decision, what that's supposed to tell us in terms of our learning. And if we're not doing a good job of that, I might feel better about myself, right now, because I get to interpret the world basically no matter what happens, I'm great, right? But that's not good for me in the long run because I'm not going to spot my errors. And I need to be able to spot my errors in order to improve my decision making. And this is a big problem that we have. So we obviously need humility to do that. But the other thing we need is an eye on the prize. We need to understand, who are we taking care of? Are we taking care of the person that we are today? Or are we taking care of the person that we're going to be in the future? And obviously we want to take care of the person that we are in the future because there's many, many more of those people than the one version of me that exists today.
Wow, that's amazing. And thinking in future terms, future pacing decisions. Why would I do this? Why would I not do this? Well, it's for the security and the protection of that future self.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we do in planning, but it's hard to do that. We have this recency bias.
Right.
It's a simpler way of understanding recency bias. We think we made a really good decision by staying all equities last year. However, that may not be a good decision just because it had a good outcome. We have to be honest with ourselves in order to have good long-term results for our portfolios and ultimately for our families and ourselves. The next topic that I want to hit on here with Annie Duke is the happiness test. This is probably one of my favorite tools that she explains in her book, How to Decide. Really love this tool on really figuring out how much time you should spend making a decision.
Okay, so the happiness test is this. basically, when we're thinking about how much time we should take on a decision, what we're really saying is, how much are we willing to sort of increase our error rate, right? Like if we take less time on a decision, it's more likely that we're going to get a bad result. It's more likely I'm going to get a dish I don't like so much, right? So if I save time, maybe I'm going to make a slightly less good decision. Okay, so then what we want to say is, okay, so let's imagine your chicken's really dry. You don't actually like it very much. Now, this is where the happiness test comes in. So I'll ask you, Casey. So you're in the restaurant, you've taken your 15 minutes, you get the dish, it's disgusting. The first thing that comes to your mind is I made a mistake. So let's just start there. And that's ridiculous because you don't have a time machine. So you did the work. Sometimes when you go through green lights, you get in accidents. That's what just happened to you. It wasn't a mistake to go through the green light. The chef was off that night. So you get your disgusting chicken. You don't really want to eat it. And now I see you a year later. And I say, hey, do you remember a year ago when you took 15 minutes to decide on that meal and then you got kind of that disgusting chicken that you didn't really want to eat? All right, so I'm seeing you a year later here. How much did that one meal a year ago affect your happiness today?
I've used that so many times now.
Man,
and then there's free rolls, right? Well, when I go out to eat with my wife, we both want the same dish. It's like, well, you get one, I'll get the other, and then we'll split. So it's a free roll. You can't lose, right? So what I want to hit on next with Annie Duke is bluffing. Okay, so what's the most important thing you're looking for when you're working with a financial advisor? You want to find somebody you can trust. You want to understand whether someone is bluffing or not. And I asked her, if you were sitting down interviewing a financial advisor, what would be the biggest sign that someone is bluffing and that you couldn't trust them?
I would say that the biggest tell is there's a very simple thing in poker that strong means weak. So what does that mean? So when you have a newer player, I wouldn't do this with an expert because they might false signal you. But when you have a newer player, if they put their chips in the pot with lots of bravado, it's usually a sign their hand is pretty weak. So that actually translates pretty well, right? When people are kind of overselling their confidence, overselling how right they are, overselling their certainty, underselling nuance, underselling that there's lots of different solutions that we can explore and that we can't guarantee that it's going to work out well. I don't know what the exact right answer for you is. This is something that we're going to explore together. That's someone who you're going to want to trust more. So what's interesting is it's a little bit opposite of what our instincts are. So when people first start playing poker and those people really pound those chips in the pot, that people fold to that all the time. There's a reason why people do that, because against players who aren't as experienced, they're just like, oh, that person must be really strong. Look at what they did. So, and you can see this with political punditry, right? It's like the ones who are it's nuanced and it's complicated and there's all sorts of different ways to look at it. They're not on television.
I mean, how true is that? And what's more nuanced than healthcare or finance, right? I mean, there is not one perfect answer. Mm-hmm. You can't sit here and say, yes, you need to put everything into Ford stock, or yes, you need to put everything into Tesla stock, or you should buy an annuity. You shouldn't buy an annuity. You should own life insurance. You shouldn't own life insurance. You should have long-term care insurance or not. I mean, so many of these are just that there isn't one clear, right, best answer. There's going to be ranges of probabilities across all of those different potential decisions that you have to make. And I asked her about this, why do you see, as a business owner, I see a lot of entrepreneurs that are easily at a flip of a coin almost making 6-figure, 7-figure decisions, but yet they can't figure out what they're going to have for dinner. Mm-hmm. They'll spend more time figuring that dinner decision out than the 6-figure investment they're going to make. She said that's a very big problem in the startup world, because it seems like there's a right answer when you're picking out dinner. It doesn't seem like there is a perfect answer when you come to some of these, bigger decisions or riskier decisions. And that doesn't mean you don't spend as much time on it. You instead look at the range of variability that the different options have when you're looking at these bigger decisions. And again, remember it's nuanced. If anybody's taking a hard line in finance saying, well, this is wrong and this is the way you have to do it, then as Annie Duke would do, she'd run out the door. And we've got a special offer for you today. we partnered up with Annie to offer her latest book, How to Decide, Simple Tools for Making Better Decisions, free to you right now. In this book, Annie reveals the strategies she utilized in her poker playing career that can help you make better decisions in so many aspects of your life, including investment, financial, business decisions. We have a stack of her books right here, and we're going to give them away until they're all gone. So to claim your free copy of How to Decide, contact us now at 866-482-9559 or text us at 866-482-9559. Again, for your free copy of How to Decide. This book has already had an impact in not just my personal life, but business life and investment life. We are applying a lot of these tools in our business that she spells out here, and I know it'll make a positive impact for you. So to get your free copy, 866-482-9559. We'll be right back after this short break to talk about the IRA tax time bomb and how to diffuse it.
First-time callers are eligible to receive one in-stock book per request. Limit one book per week per household, up to 3 books per calendar year. See full terms at howardbailey.com/terms. You're listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade. Joining me, my good friend and co-host, Marshall Johnson, here with me to cover another weekend reading article with you. Again, sign up at retirewithpurpose.com. We like to pick one of these 4 articles out and highlight it on the podcast as well as the radio, and that's what we did with this one. So if you'd like a link to this article, you can also get it at retirewithpurpose.com. Just click on the podcast tab. You can also listen to our full-length conversation there. This one comes to us from Kiplinger, and it is titled, Worried About Passing Down a Big IRA? Consider a CRT. More retirement acronyms. That's all we need.
That's all we need to throw at people is more retirement acronyms, and then you throw in the tax time bomb, and everybody's on edge.
Yeah, I know, right? TNT.
Yeah. Thunder truck.
It's just too bad, but that's the reality of the financial space. It's fairly complex, and so many things have to be distilled down to these acronyms, like an IRA, right? Your individual retirement account. So your IRA is you tuck money into those accounts every year on a tax-deferred basis. You don't pay taxes today, but someday Uncle Sam's going to slam his knuckles on that door. He's going to break down your door potentially, and then he's going to ask you to pay some taxes, right? So you have to spit out these distributions, whether you want those distributions or not. I mean, you get to be 72 now, not 70 and a half, 72. Now you're going to have to begin taking required minimum distributions, and you can spread those out over your lifetime. You know, that's what the RMD is. That's how it's calculated, is it spreads out those distributions over your lifetime, which is great while you're living. Now, let's say you pass away. If you pass away, you can leave your IRA to your spouse. They can take it over just like it was their own, continue to spread those distributions out over their lifetime. And it used to be, you know, prior to January 1st of 2020, it used to be that you could leave that IRA behind to your children, your grandchildren, a non-spouse beneficiary, and they could treat that as what's called an inherited IRA. They could stretch that IRA distribution out over their lifetime. It could potentially last a couple of generations if it was managed properly and if they continued to just take that minimum distribution each and every year. An inherited IRA, we'll never see one again. It's a thing of the past thanks to what was called the Secure Act, another acronym. The Secure Act was an acronym, and that stood for Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement Act of 2019. Guess what? It set up every retirement community except for your heirs for retirement.
Yeah, it set up the IRS to take in more. It enhanced the amount of taxes that they're going to be able to extract from your kids. So
setting up the IRS for success in 2019.
Trying to deal with this big old debit balance we got on our balance
I feel like they passed this law and they go, hey, I guess we can spend a couple extra $1 trillion.
Well, hey, you know, I think a lot of people listening are like, wait a minute, I inherited money from my mom or my dad and I was able to take $2,000 a month or a year for the rest of my life. Well, that's gone away, and your kids, it's going to go away for them too. It's the elimination of the stretch IRAs that's been on Congress's wish list for years, and they finally got it through with the Secure Act. And that's, one of those things to watch out for. There's all these wish list items, and sometimes they get tucked in there. And the headline was, hey, your required minimum distributions, nobody likes those. Let's push those back to 72 and not 70 and a half. And that's what got the headlines. Buried in the lead was your kids are going to pay a lot more in taxes.
It's kind of like an estate tax, or some of the proposals that Biden had in his initial proposal, prior to achieving presidency, where you would you've got the estate tax, right, and that comes back with a vengeance potentially, and upon death, you're hit with an extra tax on your estate over and above what any other taxes you might have to pay. So you've got an estate tax, also known sometimes as an inheritance tax. Then you have the whole qualifying event, proposal, where as of the date of death, it'll say, hey, no step up in basis. And that means that all taxes are due that have been deferred on that asset for your entire life. This is very similar, right? The inability to stretch out an IRA over a lifetime means your beneficiaries are in all likelihood going to pay multiples in taxes over what they could under the previous rules. And one of the ways that IRA owners used to control those distributions after death is they would make the beneficiary a conduit trust or a trusteed IRA in order to limit the beneficiary's ability to access IRA funds or to limit distributions to their RMDs. So you would leave your IRA in this trust, and that meant your beneficiaries had to do the best thing for the long-term value of that IRA. The best thing to disinherit Uncle Sam was to stretch out those distributions over your lifetime, but you can't do that anymore. So these conduit trusts, these IRA trusts, these are a thing of the past. You can no longer stretch an IRA out inside a trust, outside a trust. However, there is still one option that this article covers with us about how to minimize taxes on that IRA, how to stretch out the distributions over a lifetime for your beneficiaries. There still is an option out there today that you've probably never thought of before.
Yeah, it's called a charitable remainder trust. CRT is a trust that provides for distributions of a fixed percentage or a fixed amount to one or more beneficiaries for life or a term of less than 20 years. As the name implies, it's a charitable endeavor, right? We're still for those that are charitably inclined, donating assets, a way to distribute some of that income.
But many projections show that, really, if your beneficiary lives long enough, not only do they get more net value out of the IRA, but they're also leaving a large chunk to the charity at the same time. So you're able to still leave a huge chunk to charity and get actually more net benefit out of the IRA for your beneficiaries than if you just left the IRA to them outright. That's what many of the projections are showing. Now, historically, using charitable remainder trusts in our office, it's been for highly appreciated assets, highly appreciated stock, things like that. Yeah. Someone would have a highly concentrated position at a couple that had, the vast majority of their net worth, I think it was like 80, 90% of the net worth was in JP Morgan stock. They wanted to reduce the risk that they had there. They wanted to reduce how much that was of their portfolio. However, if they did that, they'd be hit with a massive tax. So instead, we can move those funds into a charitable remainder trust and sell those assets, re-diversify that portfolio to provide them a more stable income stream. And we also got a tax deduction when that happened at the same time. That's how you typically see charitable remainder trusts get used. However, this is a totally different application of this. Now you're leaving that IRA. You're leaving that IRA to a charitable remainder trust so that your beneficiary can then get distributions from that charitable remainder trust over their entire life expectancy. And so now they can take distributions for their entire life, just like they would with a stretch IRA, and pay less in taxes themselves along the way due to the nature of how a charitable remainder trust works. They're keeping a lot more of every single distribution over a longer period of time, resulting in less taxes, more money in their pocket, less money in Uncle Sam's pocket, and it goes to a good cause at the end of their lifetimes.
Yeah, it's really creative planning, right? Is what we're talking about. This is not your typical invest in stocks and bonds and buy and hold and systematically rebalance. Now, every family may be in slightly different situations where if they've got 5 children, maybe they don't need to utilize a concept like this. But as these tax laws change, this is one important part to having an active financial plan is you're sitting down every year looking at the changes. How did it impact yourself, your kids, your future taxation?
The article spells out a good example here. Let's say that you leave behind an IRA worth $400,000. So you leave behind a $400,000 IRA. Now your beneficiaries, they're going to be required to distribute that balance over 10 years. So let's say they do the smart thing. They spread it out over a 10-year period. That's $40,000 a year for 10 years, assuming there's no growth. Let's say they pay 22% in taxes on that. They're going to pay $8,800 in taxes every year. So they're going to spend $88,000 in taxes over a 10-year period, assuming that their income doesn't push them into an even higher tax bracket, or tax laws don't change and push them into a higher tax bracket. That means all things held true today, $400,000 goes to your beneficiary over 10 years. They net $312,000. If instead they took that $400,000 and upon death it went into a charitable remainder trust, they now get $28,000 a year for the rest of their lives, and only let's say that only $4,000 in income is generated from the investments inside of that trust. That means that they're only paying $880 a year in taxes every year over their lifetime. They're getting $28,000 a year. You can quickly see how they could get substantially more net benefit out of that charitable remainder trust where you left that IRA versus just getting the IRA outright.
Right, because they're paying taxes on the gains every year as opposed to the entire amount.
And some interesting planning opportunities come along with this. For instance, maybe when your beneficiaries inherit that charitable remainder trust, they go, I'd really like to leave this IRA money behind to my kids or your grandkids. Well, they could take a portion. Let's say they take of that $28,000 a year. They take $5,000 of that every year. They buy a life insurance policy that's going to replace the value of that IRA, and now they're going to replace the whole value tax-free to their heirs. Now you created a multi-generational IRA that's by far and above more tax efficient than ever leaving that IRA outright to your beneficiaries. If these are the kind of things that you're pondering, if you're wondering what you do with that IRA, what's a charitable remainder trust, how do I actually get as much as I possibly can out of this IRA for myself, my beneficiaries, my children, my grandchildren? That should be the question that you're asking yourself. How do I disinherit Uncle Sam and follow the letter of the law in order to make that happen? It's going to take a team. It's going to take your certified financial planner practitioner. It's going to take your CPA. It's going to take your estate planner. You need to sit down and get a real assessment of where you stand today in order to make the best decisions moving forward. And we have that opportunity for you right now, where you can meet with an independent advisor on our team, either in person, through a video meeting from the comfort of your home, and we'll help you determine how prepared you are to handle things like inflation, healthcare emergencies, stock market crashes, and as we said here, rising taxation. In short, we'll take the guesswork out of financial planning for you. It can take just 30 minutes. So give us a call right now, 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559, a comprehensive financial review at no obligation. We'll see you right back here next week on Retire with Purpose.
You've been listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. Investment advisory services offered through Howard Bailey Securities, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Working with Howard Bailey Securities, LLC cannot guarantee investment success or that specific financial goals will be achieved. Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards, Inc. owns the certification marked CFP and Certified Financial Planner in the U.S., which it awards to individuals who successfully complete CFP Board's initial and ongoing certification requirements. Howard Bailey Financial is a registered trademark of Howard Bailey Financial. All rights reserved. Information is not intended to provide specific legal or tax advice. Howard Bailey Financial nor its advisors are qualified to give tax or legal advice. You are encouraged to consult with your tax or legal professional for guidance on your individual situation. This radio show is a paid placement.